What should the NBA do now?
So they're going to have to adopt some changes, Rachel, because while there definitely are positive tests happening, we know of a lot of them, what's really causing games to be postponed is the contact tracing. When one player gets a confirmed test and then all of a sudden they have to put 6 or 7 players into a contact tracing protocol. So the idea here would be to amend some of the day-to-day procedures so that you won't have to put as many players in contact tracing. Keep them farther apart, put some more measures in it, maybe not have contact tracing be so long so that you wouldn't have a devastating effect on a team. But there's another message that's going to have to get through. Rachel, there are hundreds of players in this league who have had COVID over the last 9 or 10 months. There are certain teams that have had double digits. I've heard at least one team thinks its entire roster has the antibodies. But that does not necessarily mean, as we saw with Kevin Durant, who has admitted he had COVID in the past, that you can't be put into contact tracing. And so players may be instructed to change their behavior off the court, away from team facilities, even if they are operating under the belief that they have some protection with COVID, and that's going to be a hard sell as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is difficult. This is a difficult circumstance. While COVID is peaking at its highest moments right now, I do think that they're going to have to put more protocols in place to try to protect these guys. But at the end of the day, I think people are just going to get it. You know, it's just inevitable. It's too many different layers to it to where people have contact and can possibly, you know, contract it. And so I think teams are going to have to keep, you know, really being strict with their players. Players have to be pros about this to make sure that everyone's staying healthy in the building. And ultimately, we're going to see postponed games. That's just going to be part of the deal. But I do think they're going to keep moving forward. And eventually, maybe by the time we get to the playoffs, you may see another bubble then. And now we get everybody in the building like we did in Disney last year, which went off amazing. But I think they got to get to that point. And look, if you want to be high in the standings, if this is important to you to go after this championship, then you have to make sacrifices about where you go and who you interact with. And if teams aren't taking care of business and their whole team is getting COVID, then somebody or multiple people on that team is not really serious about what they're doing and not being professional. So I do think the league has to be very strict about this, and they have to get a hold on this so that we can move forward with a successful season.
And it's an important distinction, right? Look, people who test positive for COVID haven't necessarily done anything wrong. There are so many people I know who have tried to do everything the right way, and this virus creeps in. That is how this works. But there is also a matter of, hey, you can try to mitigate your risk. And your point about having to sacrifice goes exactly to what Brian was just saying, the idea that in players' personal lives especially, do you, and I'm not talking about crazy stuff, I'm not talking about wildly irresponsible stuff, I'm talking about the same stuff the rest of us are all grappling with. Hey, we haven't had a barbecue in 6 months. Can we finally have one? It's outside. Hey, my kid really is desperate for just some human contact. They want to play with their friends. These are things that all Americans are dealing with every day as this spike in coronavirus cases. I can't even call it a spike anymore. Just the way cases continue to mushroom in this country are dealing with. And the level of sacrifices that players may be asked to make from here on out to mitigate some of the contact tracing issues that Brian is talking about. Kevin Durant, the example he gave, a friend or family member having a positive test is what caused him to sit, right, for those days, even though he already had COVID, even though he did test to still have antibodies now. We don't know enough to have him just mix with the rest of the team, so he had to sit. And it's going to be harder and harder for players to just live their daily lives. And to your point, Fiz, they have to decide, is it worth it? It's what I started the show with. Right. Is it worth it? We are all having to decide over and over again every day with every interaction we have, is it worth it? And it, of course, extends to what Doc Rivers was upset about.
Yes.
In that Philly game Saturday against the Nuggets, the 7 players who played, 3 played more than 40 minutes, including rookie Tyrese Maxey, who scored 39. Woo. Doc explained before the game his concern about any of his players playing that much. Take a listen.
I'm more concerned with health on the floor. You know, we're going to play players tonight that haven't played a lot of minutes. You know, I'm not going to, you know, so like when you got 7 bodies, this one's going to have to play 40 plus minutes. And so, and that's not just for today, that's long-term health, you know, with the accumulation of games. You know, it's the numbers we want to stay away from with our players.
All right, so Fizz, you know Doc's pain. You've had to manage minutes in your time as a head coach. What would your concerns be when faced with the same situation as Doc?
He's hitting it on the head. I mean, the one thing I think all of us coaches have become over the last few years is like sports scientists,
right.
like unofficially, right? So we have learned that there is a science to the fact that if a guy is playing so many minutes, say 5 minutes a game, low minute guy, and all of a sudden he jumps up to 40 minutes a night playing competitive NBA basketball against the best players in the world, that could lead to injury, especially over cumulative nights. And so he's right. And so again, the league is gonna have to figure out how do we work this so that, one, we're protecting our players from COVID, but at the same time, we're protecting our players on the court from getting serious injuries, pulls, twists, things like that that can have you out for a whole year, for 6 months, things like that. And so, yes, Doc is right. When you're a coach, you're trying to manage all of this, and when you got 7 guys, you really don't have a choice. Most of those guys are going to play close to 40-plus minutes, and that's just the situation that you're in.
When they came up with this 8-player rule, it wasn't in the COVID era, and maybe it would happen 1 time or 2 times a year in the entire NBA, and maybe it would just happen for one night because a guy or two had a twisted ankle or was under the weather for one day. This rule, this 8-player rule, was not built for contact tracing that lasts 7 days, and so there's really only 2 options. You're either going to have to reevaluate the contact tracing rules as a result of new protocol, or they're going to have to consider expanding the rosters, which they've already done a little bit of by allowing 10-day contracts, which they don't usually allow at this point in the season. We've seen a couple of teams sign hardship players. Before this season started, Rachel, the NBA kicked around extending the amount of two-way players from 2 per team to 4 per team, or even negotiate to 3. They ended up not doing that. They may have to relook at that to give a little bit more of a buffer.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.